Some scars are earned in the shadows, paid for in blood that the public never sees. Marissa Sullivan was just a quiet trauma nurse at Mercy General until a wealthy patient's cruel mockery triggered an unexpected visit from the Pentagon, unearthing a classified secret that brought a hospital to its knees. The morning shift at Mercy General Hospital's newly renovated pavilion wing always began with a sterile, suffocating kind of quiet. This was the VIP floor, a sanctuary of mahogany-paneled suites, private chefs, and Egyptian cotton sheets, reserved strictly for Chicago's elite. Marissa Sullivan walked down the pristine corridor, her rubber-soled shoes making no sound against the polished Italian marble. Marissa was 34, with prematurely graying hair pulled into a tight, practical bun and eyes the color of a winter sky. She was an exceptional nurse, precise and unflappable, but she possessed a physical trait that made the hospital administration nervous: a sprawling, jagged lattice of burned scars. The thick, pale keloid tissue crawled from the left side of her jaw down her neck and wrapped around her left arm like a sleeve of melted wax. Usually, Marissa wore a custom long-sleeved undershirt to hide the worst of it. But today, the hospital's centralized air conditioning had failed, pushing the ward's temperature to a sweltering 80 degrees. Reluctantly, Marissa had rolled her sleeves to the elbows to comply with the hospital's strict sterile field protocols for changing surgical drains. Room 402 belonged to Eleanor Prescott. Eleanor was the wife of Richard Prescott, a billionaire real estate developer, whose name was currently etched onto the hospital's donor wall in heavy bronze letters. Eleanor was recovering from an elective, highly invasive cosmetic reconstruction. She was 50, fiercely manicured even in a hospital bed, and possessed a temper that had already driven 3 junior nurses to tears since her admission on Tuesday. Marissa tapped lightly on the heavy oak door before pushing it open. "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott," Marissa said, her voice a calm, even baritone. She pushed a cart laden with saline, fresh gauze, and new Jackson Pratt drainage bulbs into the room. "I'm here to check your vitals and change your surgical dressings." Eleanor, who was furiously tapping on the screen of her iPad, didn't bother to look up. "Finally. I pressed the call button 5 minutes ago. My iced water is practically warm, and my surgeon, Dr. Aries, was supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. It's 8:15. Dr. Aries is currently in emergency surgery. Ma'am, he will round on you as soon as he is out. Let's get these drains cleared." Marissa stepped up to the bedside. As she reached forward to adjust the mechanized bed, the fluorescent reading light positioned above Eleanor's head illuminated Marissa's left arm in harsh, unforgiving detail. Eleanor's eyes snapped away from her screen and locked onto Marissa's forearm. A visceral sneer twisted her perfectly taut face. She physically recoiled, pressing her back against the pillows. "What on earth is that?" Eleanor gasped, pointing a diamond-ringed finger at Marissa's arm. Marissa paused. She looked down at her own skin, then back to the patient. "They are burn scars, Mrs. Prescott. Please try to remain still. I need to empty the surgical drain near your abdomen. Don't touch me." Eleanor snapped, swatting the air between them. "Are you out of your mind? I'm not letting you near my open incisions with that. It's disgusting. I demand to know your medical history before you put your hands on me." Marissa's expression remained entirely blank, a mask honed by years of enduring things far worse than the shrill panic of a wealthy socialite. "I assure you, Mrs. Prescott, I am fully sterilized. The scars are from an old injury. They are entirely healed tissue. There is no risk of infection. I don't care what they are." Eleanor's voice escalated to a shrill octave that easily penetrated the heavy suite door. "It's unsightly. It's unhygienic. My husband just donated $3 million to this hospital, and they send me a nurse who looks like she crawled out of a house fire. This is a premium recovery suite, not a charity clinic. Get out. Marissa's jaw tightened. For a fraction of a second, the pristine hospital room faded. The sterile scent of rubbing alcohol was abruptly replaced by the phantom stench of aviation fuel, scorched sand, and burning flesh. The distant beeping of a heart monitor morphed into the frantic, deafening warning alarms of a downed UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. Marissa blinked forcefully, shoving the memory back into the dark vault at the back of her mind. "Mrs. Prescott," Marissa said, her voice dangerously quiet but completely composed. "Your drains are currently full. If they back up, you risk a severe hematoma that could compromise your cosmetic results. I can have another nurse step in, but it will take at least 20 minutes to prep another cart. I strongly advise you let me complete the procedure." "Did you not hear me?" Eleanor was practically vibrating with rage. "I want you out of my room, and I want the floor supervisor now. You have no business being in a patient-facing role looking like that." Marissa slowly lowered her hands. She carefully stepped back from the bed, ensuring the sterile field remained unbroken. "As you wish, ma'am. I will page head nurse Lowry for you." Without another word, Marissa turned and walked out of the room, her posture entirely rigid, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind her. By noon, the fallout had metastasized through the administrative levels of Mercy General. Like an aggressive infection, Marissa had retreated to the staff break room, quietly charting while she drank a cup of black coffee. She had already scrubbed it in and out of 2 other rooms, her sleeves rolled down despite the heat, her demeanor entirely unchanged, but the hospital grapevine was exceptionally fast. Everyone knew about the incident in 402. At exactly 12:15 p.m., the break room door swung open. Patricia Lowry, the veteran head nurse of the pavilion wing, stepped inside. She looked exhausted. "Marissa," Patricia sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Butler wants to see you in his office." Arian Butler was the hospital administrator, a man who possessed a master's degree in business and 0 clinical experience. He viewed the hospital as a ledger and the patients in the pavilion wing as his primary shareholders. Marissa closed her chart. "Did she file a formal complaint?" "She didn't just file a complaint, Marissa. She called her husband. Richard Prescott just had his lawyers contact the board. They are threatening to pull the funding for the new Pediatric Cardiovascular Center unless you are severely disciplined and permanently removed from the VIP floors. Butler is out for blood." Marissa nodded slowly. She stood up, tossing her empty coffee cup into the trash. "I'll go see him." "Marissa, wait." Patricia grabbed her arm gently. "I tried to defend you. I told him you have the lowest infection rates on the floor, the best patient outcomes, but he doesn't care. Just play the game. Apologize. Tell him you'll wear the compression sleeves. Don't throw your career away over Eleanor Prescott." Marissa offered Patricia a rare, sad smile. "I appreciate it, Patty, but I don't apologize for my skin." The walk to the executive offices felt longer than usual. When Marissa entered Butler's expansive glass-walled office, she found him pacing behind his mahogany desk. Dr. Thomas Aries, Eleanor's surgeon, was sitting on one of the leather sofas, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Nurse Sullivan," Butler barked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Have a seat. I prefer to stand, Mr. Butler." Butler stopped pacing and glared at her. "Suit yourself. Let me be unequivocally clear, Sullivan. Your behavior this morning was a catastrophic failure of patient relations. Mrs. Prescott is deeply traumatized." "Mrs. Prescott was repulsed by my scars," Marissa corrected evenly. "I maintained complete professionalism. I offered to complete her necessary medical care. She refused, and I respected her wishes. You terrified a high-net-worth donor." Butler slammed a hand on his desk. She specifically requested a visually pleasing, serene recovery environment. You marched in there with your sleeves rolled up, displaying a severe physical disfigurement, showing a complete lack of professional judgment. Dr. Aries cleared his throat. "Arian, to be fair, the AC on the floor is broken. OSHA guidelines permit staff to adjust their uniforms to prevent heat exhaustion. Stay out of this, Tom." Butler snapped. He turned back to Marissa. "Here is what is going to happen, Sullivan. You are going to go back upstairs to room 402. You are going to offer Mrs. Prescott a written apology. Following that, you will be suspended without pay for 2 weeks. When you return, you will be reassigned to the basement, records or laundry, somewhere out of sight. Sign this disciplinary acknowledgement." He shoved a piece of paper across the desk. Marissa looked at the paper. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she looked Butler dead in the eye. "No." Butler blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me? I will not apologize for the scars I bear, Mr. Butler, and I will not sign a disciplinary form that implies my physical appearance is a violation of medical protocol. If you wish to terminate me, you may do so. But I suggest you consult with HR regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act before you fire a registered nurse for having healed burn tissue." Butler's face turned a mottled shade of red. "You think you can cite labor laws to me? You are an at-will employee. Prescott is withholding $3 million because of you. You are fired, Sullivan. Clear out your locker. I want you off the property in 20 minutes. Marissa felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The bureaucratic weight of civilian life had always felt trivial compared to where she had come from. "Understood," she said quietly. She turned on her heel and walked out of the office. As she rode the elevator down to the locker rooms, she pulled her phone from her pocket. She had only made one call during her break earlier. Not to a union rep, not to a lawyer. She had made a call to an old friend in Washington, D.C., just to warn them that she might need a character reference for a new job. She hadn't expected it to escalate to a termination this quickly. Down in the basement, Marissa began packing her meager belongings into a duffel bag. A spare pair of scrubs, her stethoscope, a battered paperback novel. As she zipped the bag shut, the hospital's PA system crackled to life. It wasn't the usual automated voice. It was the frantic, breathless voice of the chief of hospital security. "Code black. I repeat, code black. Total facility lockdown. All staff remain in your current locations. Executive staff report to the main lobby immediately." Marissa frowned. A code black was a bomb threat or a mass casualty security event. Upstairs, chaos had erupted. Butler had barely finished drafting Marissa's termination email when his office phone began ringing incessantly. Outside his window, looking down at the hospital's main roundabout, he saw something that made his blood run cold. 4 black Chevrolet Suburbans, with heavily tinted windows and government plates, had aggressively hopped the curb, forming a barricade around the hospital's main entrance. Men in dark suits and earpieces poured out, immediately securing the perimeter. Local Chicago police cruisers were screeching to a halt at the edge of the campus. Sealing off the streets, Butler sprinted out of his office, pushing past panicked nurses and doctors, making his way to the first-floor lobby. "What is going on?" he screamed at the security guards. "Who called the police?" "We didn't call them, sir," the head guard stammered. "The Secret Service just seized our surveillance room. They locked down the doors up in room 402. Eleanor Prescott looked out her window and gasped. She immediately grabbed her phone and dialed her husband. "Richard, you won't believe this. The police are here." They're locking down the hospital. I told you that nurse was dangerous. Tell your lawyers to sue this hospital into the ground." Back in the lobby, the heavy automatic sliding doors were forced open by two men in tactical gear. The murmuring crowd of doctors and administrators fell. Dead silent. Through the doors walked a tall, imposing man in a pristine dark navy suit. His face was stern, lined with years of heavy decisions. He wore a lapel pin that caught the light, the seal of the Department of Defense. It was Secretary of Defense Richard Gallagher. Behind him walked two United States Army generals in full dress uniform, their chests heavy with ribbons and decorations. Butler, sweating profusely, pushed his way to the front of the crowd. "Mr. Secretary, I am Arian Butler, the hospital administrator. We had no idea you were coming. Has there been a national emergency? We have VIP patients upstairs." Secretary Gallagher didn't even look at Butler. His eyes swept the terrified crowd of medical staff. "I am not here for your VIPs, Mr. Butler." Gallagher's voice boomed through the quiet lobby, carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "I am here for a member of my military. I am here for United States Army Captain Marissa Sullivan." The silence that fell over the expansive lobby of Mercy General Hospital was absolute. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant, muffled wail of police sirens establishing the outer perimeter. Arian Butler stared at Secretary of Defense Richard Gallagher, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. I beg your pardon, Mr. Secretary," Butler stammered, the color draining entirely from his face. "Captain? There must be some sort of profound clerical error. Marissa Sullivan is a civilian registered nurse, and she is, well, as of 20 minutes ago, she is no longer employed at this facility." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Secretary Gallagher stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the hospital administrator. The two Army generals behind him stiffened, their expressions hardening into masks of pure, unadulterated contempt. "You fired her," Gallagher stated. It wasn't a question. It was a low, dangerous rumble that echoed off the marble floors. She violated hospital policy," Butler lied, sweat beading his forehead. "She caused severe emotional distress to a high-profile VIP donor. I had a fiduciary duty to—" "You have a duty to shut your mouth, Mr. Butler," Gallagher interrupted, his voice cracking like a whip. "Where is she?" "Basement." A small voice squeaked from the crowd. It was Patricia Lowry, the head nurse, tears welling in her eyes. She was clearing out her locker in the basement. Gallagher gestured to two of the Secret Service agents. "Go get her." With full honors. Up on the second-floor mezzanine, which overlooked the grand atrium lobby, Eleanor Prescott had demanded her private aide wheel her out of her room the moment she heard the commotion. Draped in a silk robe, her face wrapped in compression bandages from her recent surgery, Eleanor gripped the railing of the balcony. She peered down at the lobby, expecting to see a terrorist threat or a criminal apprehension. She expected to see the disfigured nurse being hauled away in handcuffs. Instead, she watched as 4 men in tactical gear marched solemnly toward the basement elevators. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors chimed open. Marissa Sullivan stepped out into the lobby. She was dressed in her street clothes, a pair of simple blue jeans and a gray long-sleeve shirt with her weathered duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She stopped in her tracks as she saw the heavily armed agents, the local police, the terrified hospital staff, and the 3 men standing in the center of the room. Her eyes locked onto Secretary Gallagher. For a moment, the weary, stoic nurse vanished. Her spine snapped straight. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. Even out of uniform, The ingrained discipline of a soldier radiated from her every movement. She dropped her duffel bag. It hit the marble with a dull thud. Marissa raised her right hand in a razor-sharp salute. Secretary Gallagher immediately returned the salute, holding it for a long, respectful moment before slowly lowering his hand. The two generals mirrored his movement. "At ease, Captain," Gallagher said softly. Marissa relaxed her stance, though her expression remained guarded. "Mr. Secretary, to what do I owe the presence of the Department of Defense in a civilian ward?" "We've been looking for you for 8 months, Marissa," Gallagher said, dropping the formal titles for a fleeting moment. "When you retired and went off the grid, the Pentagon was tearing the country apart trying to find you. When you made that background check call to Colonel Hayes an hour ago, he flagged your location. I happened to be in Chicago for a defense summit. I wasn't going to wait another day." Butler, unable to process the reality unfolding before him, took a trembling step forward. "Mr. Secretary, please, what is going on? Who is she?" Gallagher turned slowly to face the hospital administrator, making sure his voice carried to every doctor, nurse, and patient listening from the balconies above. His eyes briefly flicked up to the second-floor mezzanine, where Eleanor Prescott stood watching, paralyzed. "You called her a liability. Mr. Butler, you fired her because a wealthy patient found her scars unappealing." Gallagher's voice boomed, heavy with righteous fury. "Allow me to educate you on the cost of your freedom. The woman standing before you is United States Army Captain Marissa Sullivan. For 6 years, she served as a Tier 1 combat trauma surgical nurse attached to a highly classified Special Forces extraction unit." Gasps rippled through the crowd of medical staff. Patricia Lowry covered her mouth with both hands. 4 years ago, Gallagher continued, projecting his voice so it echoed off the glass walls. During an undisclosed night operation in the Kunar province, Captain Sullivan's medical evacuation Chinook was struck by a surface-to-air missile. The helicopter crashed into a hostile ravine. The pilots were killed instantly. The fuselage was immediately engulfed in flames, and the perimeter was swarmed by 50 enemy combatants. Marissa looked down at her hands, her jaw clenching as the phantom smell of aviation fuel returned. Captain Sullivan suffered multiple shrapnel wounds and a broken collarbone in the crash, Gallagher stated, his gaze sweeping the room. Despite her injuries, she did not flee. While taking heavy enemy fire, Captain Sullivan repeatedly entered the burning wreckage. She dragged 6 incapacitated Army Rangers out of the inferno. The lobby was dead silent. Even the Secret Service agent stood a little taller. During her final extraction of a critically wounded sergeant, Gallagher's voice grew thick with emotion. The helicopter's secondary fuel cell detonated. Captain Sullivan shielded the wounded soldier with her own body. The blast wave and the chemical fire burned through her uniform, melting it into her left arm, her neck, and her jaw. She sustained third-degree burns over 20% of her body. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the Falagi room, yet she continued to return fire with her sidearm and maintained pressure on the sergeant's severed femoral artery for 45 minutes, until a secondary extraction team arrived. Gallagher turned his hardened gaze upward, locking eyes directly with Eleanor Prescott on the balcony. Eleanor shrank back, her face entirely pale beneath her bandages. "She didn't get those scars from a tragic accident, Mr. Butler." Gallagher's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "She earned them in the fires of hell, ensuring that 6 American sons made it home to their families. She is the living embodiment of sacrifice. And you threw her out like trash." Butler's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the security desk to keep from collapsing. He was a man who understood numbers, ledgers, and leverage. He suddenly realized he possessed none, he had just publicly humiliated a national hero, secretary. Gallagher turned his back on the trembling administrator and faced Marissa once more. He nodded to the general. Standing to his right, the general stepped forward, carrying a polished mahogany box inlaid with the seal of the United States. He opened it, revealing a 5-pointed bronze star hanging from a pale blue silk ribbon adorned with 13 white stars. The Medal of Honor. A collective, breathless murmur washed over the lobby. It was the highest and most prestigious military decoration in the United States, awarded to recognize service members who had distinguished themselves by extraordinary acts of valor. It was rarely awarded to living recipients. Captain Marissa Sullivan, the general began, his voice ringing out with absolute authority as he read the official citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life, above and beyond the call of duty. Her extraordinary heroism and selflessness in the face of insurmountable odds saved the lives of 6 United States Army Rangers. Her actions reflect the highest credit upon herself, the Medical Corps, and the United States Army. Gallagher took the medal. From the box, he stepped up to Marissa. Tears were finally welling in her steel-gray eyes, tracing silent lines down the scarred tissue she had borne in silence for years. Gallagher carefully placed the ribbon around her neck, letting the bronze star rest against her chest. The president wanted to pin this on you himself in the Rose Garden, Gallagher whispered, so only she could hear. But I think doing it right here, in front of the people who needed to see it most, feels a bit more poetic. Marissa swallowed hard. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. Your job is done, Marissa. He smiled gently. Suddenly, the glass doors of the lobby slid open violently, interrupting the solemn moment. A man in an expensive tailored suit rushed in, panting heavily, followed by 2 armed police officers who had escorted him through the barricade. It was Richard Prescott, the billionaire real estate mogul. What the hell is going on here? Richard bellowed, looking wildly around the room. My wife called me screaming about a terrorist attack. Where is Eleanor? Richard's eyes darted from the armed agents to Secretary Gallagher. And finally, they landed on Marissa Sullivan. He saw the Medal of Honor resting against her chest. He saw the burn scars extending up her neck. As a former Naval Reserve officer himself, Richard instantly understood the gravity of the blue ribbon with the blue ribbon with the battalion. Richard instantly understood the gravity of the blue ribbon with the blue ribbon with the 13 stars. The blood drained from his face. He looked up to the second-floor mezzanine and saw his wife, Eleanor, cowering behind her aide. Mr. Prescott, Butler gasped, seeing his financial savior and desperately lunging toward him. Richard, thank God you're here. There has been a massive misunderstanding. Your wife was startled by Nurse Sullivan's appearance. I acted hastily to protect your family's peace of mind, just as you would want. Richard Prescott looked at Butler, then up at his wife. Piecing the puzzle together with sickening clarity, Eleanor had called him earlier, shrieking about a disfigured, repulsive nurse. You fired a Medal of Honor recipient. Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. Because my wife didn't like her scars. I was protecting your $3 million donation, Butler pleaded. His voice cracking. Richard turned to Butler with a look of absolute disgust. My father died in the Iadrang Valley. I served 8 years in the Navy. You think I want my money associated with a hospital that treats veterans like diseased animals? Richard stepped right into Butler's personal space. The donation is gone, Arian. I am pulling the funding for the pediatric wing, and I am personally calling the hospital board of directors. By tomorrow morning, you won't be able to get a job managing a pharmacy in this city. Butler let out a suffocated wheeze. His career was evaporating before his very eyes. Richard then turned to Marissa. He didn't offer his hand. Instead, he stood at full attention and bowed his head deeply. Captain Sullivan, words cannot express my profound shame regarding my wife's behavior. I beg your forgiveness on behalf of my family. The disrespect you suffered today is a stain on my name. Marissa looked at the billionaire. She didn't gloat. She didn't sneer. She simply nodded. I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Prescott, but true character is revealed not in how we treat the powerful, but in how we treat the vulnerable. Your wife has much to learn. She turned back to Secretary Gallagher. Sir, if the ceremony is concluded, I would like to leave. Of course, Captain, Gallagher said. He turned to his men. Clear a path. We're taking our hero home. The Secret Service agents parted the crowd. As Marissa Sullivan walked toward the exit, the lobby of Mercy General Hospital erupted. The doctors, the nurses, the security guards, the patients watching from the balconies above, they began to clap. Applause grew louder, building into a deafening roar of respect and admiration that shook the glass walls of the atrium. Marissa paused at the sliding doors. She didn't look back at Arian Butler, who was weeping quietly near the security desk. She didn't look up at Eleanor Prescott, who was sobbing into her hands on the balcony, facing the utter ruin of her social standing. Marissa simply adjusted the duffel bag on her shoulder, touched the cool bronze of the star resting against her chest, and walked out into the warm Chicago sunlight. She had survived the fires of war, and she had survived the cruelty of the superficial world. She was exactly who she was meant to be. True heroes often wear their sacrifices on their skin, hiding in plain sight among us. Never judge a book by its cover, because you never know the battles someone has fought just to stand in front of you.